After Jesus' birth, which happened in Bethlehem of Judea during the reign of Herod, astrologers from the east arrived in Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the newborn ruler of the Jews? We observed his star at its rising and have come to pay homage." At this news, Herod became greatly disturbed, as did all of Jerusalem. Summoning all the chief priests and religious scholars of the people, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they informed him. "Here is what the prophet has written. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, since from you will come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Herod called the astrologers aside and found out from them the exact time of the star's appearance. Then he sent them to Bethlehem after having instructed them, "Go and get detailed information about the child. When you have found him, report back to me so that I may go and offer homage too." After their audience with the ruler, they set out. The star which they had observed at its rising went ahead of them until it came to a standstill over the place where the child lay. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and upon entering the house, found the child with Mary, his mother. They prostrated themselves and paid homage. Then they opened their coffers and presented the child with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They were warned in a dream not to return to Herod, so they went back to their own country by another route. These are the words of God for the people of God. Let's pray. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So let's just hop right into this story as we hear it from the Gospel of Matthew. We encounter the story of some astrologers who had been studying the skies. In their studies, they've come to discover a star that wasn't like the rest. So they set out from the east and made their way over to Jerusalem and asked King Herod where this newborn ruler of the Jews could be found, so that they could pay him homage. This was the first Herod had heard of this news, and it left him kind of shook. So he calls upon these religious leaders to ask them more about this baby. The religious leaders pull up their scriptures and they tell Herod about these prophecies foretelling Jesus' birth. Still feeling some kind of way, he pulled the astrologers aside and he asked them for more details about how to get to this child under the guise of wanting to also pay him homage, and sent them on their way. Spoiler alert, Herod is not trying to pay them homage. He is plotting to eliminate this threat that this baby poses to him. Anyway, the astrologers leave as Herod had told them to do, and they relocated the star that caught their attention in the first place. And they follow it all the way to its stopping point, which was over the place where baby Jesus was located. They were overjoyed at successfully getting here, and they found themselves in awe once they encountered this Christ child. They were so moved that their coffers were opened and they gave of the best they had. And then they returned home using a different route that wouldn't put them in Herod's way. There's a lot going on here, and we could dissect this all day, but I'm sure you don't want to be in your chairs for that long. I really just want to zoom in on one point for this morning, and it's a point that I've discovered recently. We often hear this story about these astrologers or three kings, depending on which version we've heard. We sing their songs, and many a child has played the role of one of these guests as we hear about the fine gifts they bring: gold, frankincense, myrrh. What we don't often get to hear is about the astrologers themselves. Every now and then I'll run across a scholar's work in revealing a few more bits of demographical information about these people, from where they might have come, what ethnicity they'd likely be, and other such information. But there's one fact about them that I recently discovered that's hidden in plain sight. Based on the clues that Matthew leaves for us in his telling of Jesus' birth story, it's pretty clear that these people were scholarly scientist types whose religion differed from that of the Jews whose king they sought out. Their intellectual curiosities about this peculiar star sent them off on a journey to the west. We only hear of their one stop in Jerusalem with King Herod in their efforts to find this special child. This child whose very birth called forth this great gaseous sphere of energy and light. Nothing scientific could explain it, which is what got them out of their labs and libraries and onto the road to see it for themselves. And once they got there, these people of science whose religious beliefs we don't ever get to discover are moved to the point of worship as they kneel and bow before this tiny bundle of a king. They produce the finest treasures they have with them, and they experience some sort of transformation in this process. Surely these astrologers were not stupid, and coupled with the dream they had, they chose to return home using a different route to keep them from helping Herod get to and harm this special baby, and essentially putting their own privileges at risk. For us on this Epiphany Sunday, it's a significant detail to know a bit about these astrologers. Specifically, it strikes me that God chose to work through these people of science whose religious beliefs were not the same as for those who are awaiting the arrival of Jesus in this world. Said in another way, the God that we worship isn't confined by our belief systems. The God that we follow is one who continually works in and through people we would likely never choose on our own. Knowing this truth about God, we're left with some choices. We can be like Herod and flat out put our trust in our own strength and our own beings to the point that anything or anyone that isn't like the gods we've made for ourselves is a threat and must be eliminated. Frankly, this is the posture that many of us choose, whether on purpose or out of unquestioned common practices. We do this much too easily. We get like Herod on a national and local level as we fear that which is different than us. We rely more heavily on our own strength and being as a country, more so than we do on a God whose light shines on everyone equally. And it's not just our country, but many countries around the world. We value self-reliance and we consider interdependence a weakness. We make gods not just of ourselves, but also the Constitution, the flag, the illusion of security, and any variety of things, including, I would dare add, the Bible, and even our beliefs. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes we make gods of our Bibles and our beliefs. We get like Herod on a personal and communal level too. Whatever the community may be, a church or a faith community, a neighborhood, a school, a city, a state, a social club, whatever it may be, we gather together with ever-increasing boundaries that fortify and clearly mark who we are on the inside of the circle and who we aren't on the outside of it. We get so occupied with who we're trying to keep out that we often lose sight of why we're gathering in the first place. And that's a tragedy that isn't unique to our time and location. I truly believe this is why Jesus showed up in our world in the way that he did. I mean, who has ever heard of a king that comes into the world in such a stank and undesirable way, and through people who were considered nothings, near what many people would even call royal. And then we discover the bizarreness of the story as it continues with these same unknown folk birthing a child whose presence commanded the heavens in a way that captured the attention of foreign scientists who then traveled long distances to get to the source of this light, only to be in awe and fall before this child in worship, regardless of their own religious beliefs, and finally leaving the place transformed. This God of ours is not about that status quo life. This God of ours has always been about widening the circle of welcome, breaking down barriers and exclusive boundaries, and taking up the side of the lowly and least among us, so that all of us may have the abundant and harmonious life intended for everyone. Now, this isn't some cheap call for us to lose our different identities that make us the beautiful and colorful tapestry of the diversity that is humanity and all of creation. This is about honoring and celebrating our differences, seeking this light in everyone because it does exist in all of us, and then being transformed each time we're in the presence of this light. This is how I hope we approach this new year together. One of the resolutions I'd love for us to adopt here at First Congo is to continually seek that light and to open ourselves up to where we might find it and how beautifully it may transform us together. Later this month, we're going to be having our annual meeting on the 20th, and we'll be talking about several ways, new ways of positioning ourselves so that we can see the light and that we can follow it in ways that we might be transformed individually and as a faith community. And as we resolve not to capture this light, but to allow it to shine through us and reflect back to others, my prayer is that we can all experience this transformation that God intends for us. I deeply hope that we might find it in ourselves to choose not as Herod did, and to be threatened by the illusion of scarcity that privilege imposes upon us, but that we can strive to approach this light like the astrologers. These astrologers who couldn't help but to shift their priorities and seek the light in such a way that left them transformed and risking their privileges in the process. I so wish for us to continually get to this source of transformation, this light in whatever specific ways that means for each of us, that we might be so in awe that we're brought down to our knees in worship, that draws out our very best gifts to share. And as we emerge from this encounter with the light, I pray that we can choose a new and maybe unfamiliar path forward, where transformation and new life can occur. May this light continue to break into our world, leaving us better than when we began, now and evermore. Amen.
Amen.